At 57, I believed I had found peace in the rainy Cleveland suburbs. Then my 8-year-old son whispered the words that shattered my world. "Mom, don't go home tonight." In a heartbeat. I realized my husband was not planning our future, but building my coffin. He thought I was just a tired old woman he could erase for insurance money. He was wrong. I was not a victim. I was the one who would tighten the noose. My name is Eleanor Brooks, and at 57 years old, I thought the hardest part of my night would be balancing the accounts receivable for Triaxis freight systems before the midnight deadline. The industrial park on the outskirts of Cleveland was a ghost town of concrete and corrugated steel, battered by a relentless October rain. I rubbed my temples, trying to massage away the headache that had been throbbing behind my eyes for the last 3 hours. My lower back ached from sitting in the cheap office chair, a physical reminder that I was too old for these double shifts. I shut down my computer, the screen fading to black, and reached for my purse. I was ready to go home to my warmth, to my husband, and most importantly, to my son. My phone buzzed against the hard laminate of the desk, the vibration startling me in the silence of the empty office. I glanced at the screen and felt a small, tired smile touch my lips. The caller ID read Jamie. Home. My 8-year-old was probably hiding under his covers with a flashlight, calling to ask for one last story or a glass of water, trying to delay sleep just a few minutes longer. I swiped the green button and brought the phone to my ear. Hey, Bug. You should be asleep by Mom. Don't go home tonight. The voice was a whisper, barely audible, trembling so hard it sounded like it was breaking into pieces. It was Jamie, but it was not the voice of the boy who asked for bedtime stories. This was the voice of a child standing on the edge of a cliff. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. Jamie, honey, what's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? No. Mom, listen to me. His breath hitched, a wet, jagged sound. Dad is talking to a man. I know something about Dad. I'm scared. Mom, I'm really scared. A crash echoed in the background through the receiver. It sounded like glass shattering against a wall. Then came the heavy, unmistakable thud of a cabinet door slamming shut. Jamie, I shouted. Standing up so fast my chair rolled back and hit the filing cabinet. Where are you? Is Daddy there? Put Daddy on the phone. The line was filled with static, and the low murmur of a television set turned down low. Through the interference, I heard a man's voice. It was deep, distinct, and terrifyingly calm. It was not talking to a child. Insurance covers it all. The voice drifted through the static. Accident looks real. Tonight is best. Jamie, answer me. The line went dead. I stared at the black screen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My fingers shook as I hit redial. It rang once, twice. Then it clicked over to voicemail. I tried again, unable to connect. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my exhaustion. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get in the car and speed home, to kick down the door and grab my son. But as I grabbed my keys, a cold wave of nausea washed over me. Memories I had suppressed for months bubbled to the surface. The late-night whispers Victor thought I didn't hear. The arguments about money that ended too abruptly. Victor Hale, 49 years old, with his charming smile and his failing garage, had been looking at me differently lately. Not with love, but with a calculation I had refused to acknowledge. I did not drive straight into the driveway. Instead, I drove past our street in Lakewood, my headlights cut to avoid attention. I circled the block and parked 3 houses down, shrouded in the shadows of an oak tree stripping its leaves in the wind. The rain drummed a frantic rhythm on the roof of my sedan. I watched my house. It looked like the same cozy bungalow we had bought 5 years ago, but now it felt like a stage set for a horror movie. The kitchen light flickered on, casting a long, yellow rectangle onto the wet grass. Then it snapped off. A silhouette moved past the living room window. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered. I knew every neighbor on this street. I knew Victor's slouch. That shadow did not belong to anyone I knew. A chill settled deep in my bones. Jamie was right. He had seen something. My phone lit up the dark interior of the car. A text message. It was from a number I did not save in my contacts. "Hey, honey, stay at work tonight if you're tired. I'm taking Jamie out for a late burger, and then we'll crash. Don't worry. Victor." I stared at the glowing letters. My breath caught in my throat. In 10 years of marriage, Victor had never once told me not to worry. He always wanted me home. And he never, ever signed his text messages. He was trying to create a digital trail. He was building an alibi. I looked back at the dark house where a stranger was walking through my living room. I was not looking at my home anymore. I was looking at a crime scene waiting to happen. The rain drummed against the metal roof of my car, a rhythm that usually soothed me. But tonight it felt like a countdown. Sitting there in the dark, watching my own home from down the street. The silence gave way to the ghosts of the past. Before Lakewood. Before the quiet house and the garage business. I was just a tired woman in Toledo trying to keep the lights on. I could still smell the industrial lemon cleaner from the motels I scrubbed and the stale fryer grease from the diner shifts I worked to feed Melissa. My daughter is grown now, living her own life in Columbus. But back then, it was just the 2 of us against a world that did not care if we sank or swam. I met Victor Hale 10 years ago. He walked into the auto repair shop where I was working as a temporary cashier, wearing a clean work shirt and a smile that seemed to promise safety. He did not look at me like a mark or a burden. He looked at me like a man who wanted to carry the load for a while. "You look like you've been on your feet for 100 years. Eleanor," he had told me, sliding his credit card across the counter. "Let me take you to dinner. Real dinner. Not something wrapped in paper." I fell for it. I fell for the stability he projected for the first few years. Our marriage felt like a reward for decades of struggle. Victor fixed the leak in the roof without me asking. He cooked pot roast on Sundays, every Friday, without fail. He brought home a bouquet of cheap yellow daisies from the supermarket. I remember looking at those flowers and thinking that I had finally made it to the safe harbor. When I found out I was pregnant at 49, the doctors called it a geriatric pregnancy, but Victor called it a miracle. Jamie was our late life surprise, the glue that was supposed to hold us together forever. I left the heavy lifting behind and took the desk job at Triaxis so I could be there to pick Jamie up from school. But the glue had started to dry out and crack long before tonight. I leaned my head back against the headrest, closing my eyes as the memories shifted to the uncomfortable truths I had ignored. The late nights started 2 years ago. Victor would come home smelling of stale cigarette smoke and a cloying, floral perfume that was definitely not mine. I found receipts in his pockets from bars and casinos in Detroit, crumpled balls of paper that represented hundreds of dollars. Whenever I asked, he would wrap his arms around me and smooth my hair. "It's just business. L," he would say. his voice thick with false reassurance. You know how clients are. You have to wine and dine them to get the big repair contracts. It's for us. Melissa saw through him long before I did. I remember the last time she visited, watching Victor charm a neighbor over the backyard fence. He is too smooth. Mom. She had whispered to me in the kitchen, her eyes narrowing. Real people aren't that polished. He's selling you something, and you're buying it because you're tired of being alone. You're just jealous because I found someone. I had snapped back, a line that tasted like ash in my mouth now. I was an accountant. My entire life was built on balancing ledgers and spotting discrepancies for triaxis. Yet, in my own kitchen, I was blind. I signed whatever Victor put in front of me. Refinancing documents, loan applications, and endless insurance papers. It's to protect the family. Eleanor, he would say, tapping the pen against the signature line. If anything happens to me, I want you and Jamie set for life. I never read the fine print. I claimed my eyes were too bad in the evenings. But the truth was, I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe that the man who brought me daisies was also the man securing our future. I did not notice that his hands shook when he held the papers, or that the veins in his neck bulged when he talked on the phone in the garage. I heard snippets of his conversations through the thin drywall, words like interest debts and their people floated through the air. But whenever I walked in, he would hang up and smile that hollow smile. A specific memory hit me then, sharp and cold. It was from 2 weeks ago. Jamie was sitting at the kitchen table, colouring in a superhero book while I chopped carrots. "Mum?" he had asked, not looking up from his crayons. "If you disappear?" "Do we get more money?" I had laughed, wiping my hands on a towel. What kind of question is that? Bug nobody is disappearing. Dad said the house would be paid off if you went away. Jamie said innocently. He said we would be rich. At the time, I brushed it off as a child, misunderstanding an adult conversation. Now, sitting in the rain with a text message that lied about my husband's location, that innocent question felt like a blade pressing against my throat. Victor had not been reassuring a child. He had been preparing a witness. I let the screen of my phone go black without replying to Victor. I twisted the knob to kill my headlights and sank lower in the driver's seat. I was no longer a wife coming home from work. I was a ghost haunting the edges of my own life. The rain had picked up, blurring the streetlights into streaks of watery orange, but I could still see the driveway clearly. A black pickup truck with no license plates rolled silently down the street and idled in front of my house. The engine cut. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm. Victor stepped out of the front door, wiping his hands on a rag. He was smiling. It was not the tired smile he gave me, but a conspiratorial grin directed at the man climbing out of the truck. I had seen that stranger's silhouette earlier. Now I saw his face under the street lamp gaunt, hard, and utterly devoid of warmth. They moved to the bed of the truck and hoisted out a heavy metal cylinder with coiled hoses attached to the top. An industrial gas tank. My fingers fumbled with my phone. I swiped to the voice recorder app and pressed the red button. With agonizing slowness, I lowered my window just an inch. The damp October chill rushed in, carrying the scent of wet dead leaves and the faint, stinging odor of gasoline. In the distance, a freight train blasted its horn, a lonely, mournful sound that usually made me feel safe. Tonight, it sounded like a scream. I strained my ears. The wind carried their voices toward me. She stays at work tonight, Victor said. His voice was low but terrifyingly clear in the damp air. Tomorrow, people will say it was a faulty valve, a gas leak, simple, clean. Harborstone Life will pay out. And I split your share as agreed. Bile rose in my throat, hot and acidic. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. The she was me. The gas leak was not a repair job. It was an execution. Victor was not fixing our home. He was turning it into a bomb. I scanned the windows of the house, my eyes darting frantically from the living room to the upstairs bedroom. Where was Jamie? If Victor was rigging the house to fill with gas, surely he had sent Jamie away. Or had he? The stranger, the man Victor had called Doyle earlier, grunted as they hauled the tank toward the side gate. What about the kid? He was looking at us earlier. Kids talk. Evidence is a problem. Don't worry about the boy, Victor replied, his tone dismissive. I will handle his memory. He is scared. He won't say a word. Panic clawed at my chest. Jamie was a loose end to them. I gripped the door handle, my muscles tensing to throw the door open and run across the lawn. I wanted to scream, to tear Victor apart with my bare hands, but I stopped. I was a 57-year-old woman with bad knees against two men who were preparing a murder. If I ran in there now, I would just be an earlier casualty. I needed to be smart. I needed to know exactly where my son was. I dialed the number for the house directly across the street. Jane, a widow who baked cinnamon rolls for the whole neighborhood, picked up on the third ring. Hello. Her voice was thick with sleep. Jane, it's Eleanor, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, masking the tremor that threatened to shatter my composure. I'm still at work, and I completely forgot if I told Jamie he could come over for cookies tomorrow. Is he... Did you see him today? Oh, Eleanor, Jane chirped, sounding entirely too cheerful for the horror unfolding 50 feet from her door. He is right here. He is asleep on my sofa. Victor brought him over about an hour ago. Said you guys were having the gas pipes repaired tonight, and the fumes would be too strong for his asthma. Such a thoughtful husband you have. My knees went weak with relief. Yes, I choked out. He is very thoughtful. Thank you, Jane. Keep him there. Please, just keep him there. I hung up before I broke down. Jamie was safe. For now. I put the car in reverse and let it roll backward down the street without turning on the engine until I was around the corner. Then I drove. I did not stop until I reached the brightly lit, desolate parking lot of a 24-hour supermarket 3 miles away. I parked under a buzzing halogen light. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. I pressed play on the recording. Harborstone Life will pay out. The voice was tinny, mixed with the sound of rain, but it was undeniable. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The tired accountant with the failing eyesight was gone. Staring back at me was a witness. I was the only thing standing between a murderer and his payday, and I was absolutely done running. I drove back to the Triaxis warehouse under the guise of a forgotten manifest. The security guard, a kid barely out of high school, waved me through without looking up from his phone. My hands were steady now, fueled by a cold, hard resolve. I transferred the audio file from my phone to a USB drive I kept on my keychain, then sealed it inside a manila envelope. I buried it deep in the back of a locked filing cabinet in the archives room, behind 5 years of tax records that no one ever checked. If Victor destroyed my phone, the voice of his conspiracy would still exist in this steel tomb. I needed an ally. I sat in the dim light of the archive room and dialed Melissa. It was late, but I prayed she would answer. Mom, her voice was sharp, impatient. Do you know what time it is, Melissa? Please. Listen to me, I said, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. I need to tell you something about Victor. Something terrible. Oh, God. Not again. She sighed, the sound of dismissal cutting deeper than any knife. Mum, I have a massive meeting in 3 hours. I cannot deal with your drama with men right now. You are tired. Go to sleep. Melissa, this isn't drama, he is. I have to go. She interrupted. We will talk when you are not hysterical. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, realizing with a sinking heart that Victor had already laid the groundwork. He had painted me as the emotional, unstable, older woman, and my own daughter had bought the portrait. I drove home as the sky began to bruise with the grey light of dawn. I walked through the front door, feigning the exhaustion of a double shift. Victor was waiting in the kitchen. He looked like the picture of a devoted husband, holding a steaming mug of cocoa. Rough night, Elle, he asked, his voice soft, his eyes scanning my face with a predator's precision. I made this for you, extra marshmallows. I took the mug, forcing my fingers not to recoil from his touch. It was brutal. I lied. The numbers were a mess. He pulled out a chair for me. Speaking of numbers, I was reading about that new benefits package Triaxis signed with Harborstone Life. Did you sign up for the accidental death rider, the one that covers accidents at home? My heart hammered against my ribs. He was not even subtle anymore. I think so, I said, taking a sip of the cocoa. It tasted like ash. Victor. I smelled gas outside when I parked. Are you sure the lines are okay? He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Elle, you are doing it again? You are imagining things? I had the guys check everything yesterday. You are just stressed. You always worry about things that aren't there. For a second, the conviction in his voice made me waver. That was his gift. He could look at the sky and tell you it was green with such confidence that you would start to doubt your own eyes. But then I remembered the recording. I remembered the word execution. The next evening at work, the facade began to crumble completely. I was passing the break room when I heard my boss, Mr. Mason, talking on his cell phone. Yeah, it is a potential case, Mason was saying, his voice low. Solid payout, long-term employee, over 55, maximum coverage. If it happens off-site, the company liability is 0, but the commission from Harborstone is huge. I froze. He was talking about me. I was just a case number to them. I went straight to human resources. The girl at the desk was new and easily intimidated. I told her I needed to check my beneficiary details for a tax update. When she handed me the file, the room seemed to tilt. The primary beneficiary was Victor Hale. 100%. Jamie was listed only as a contingent, a backup if Victor and I died simultaneously. And there, at the bottom of the page, was my signature. It looked like my handwriting, the loop of the L, the slant of the B. But the tail of the S in Brooks was too long. It was a hesitation mark, a drag of the pen where someone was trying too hard to copy a curve. Victor had practiced. He had sat at our kitchen table while I cooked dinner and practiced signing my death warrant. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a notification on the family cloud account. Victor was texting Melissa. Your mum is overloaded. Sweetie. The message read, she is seeing things. You should help me calm her down. Don't worry. After this rough patch is over and everything is stable, I promise your share will be significant. I am looking out for all of us. I lowered the phone. He was not just killing me. He was buying my daughter's silence with money soaked in my blood. I was alone in a room full of people, staring at a forged signature, realizing that the only person who was going to save Eleanor Brooks was Eleanor Brooks. I sought out Gary Milton, a pro bono lawyer who used to volunteer at the church I attended before life got too busy. I met him in a small, rented office that smelled of stale coffee and dust. I laid the photocopied insurance documents and the examples of my real signature on his desk, my hands trembling slightly. I need to know if this holds up in court. Gary, I said, pointing to the forgery. I did not sign this amendment. My husband did. Gary adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, leaning in close. He seemed sympathetic, nodding slowly as I spoke. But when I mentioned Harborstone Life and Triaxis Freight Systems, his eyes flickered. It was a subtle shift, a tightening of the jaw, but in my desperation, I missed it. This is serious. Eleanor, Gary said, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Let me keep these copies. I will look into the precedent for digital forgeries. We have to be careful. I left feeling a sliver of hope, but it was shattered before I even reached my car. My phone rang. No caller ID. Hello, Mrs. Brooks. A distorted voice rasped on the other end. Some things should be left alone. You are an old woman. Don't dig. The first time is a warning. The second time is action. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my blood running cold. I had not told anyone but Gary where I was going. When I got home, Victor was pacing in the living room. He looked agitated, running a hand through his thinning hair. Elle, thank God you are home, he said, rushing to me. I just got a weird call from Mason. He said someone has been poking around the company insurance files, asking questions about policies. He thinks it might be scammers targeting employees. We need to be careful with who we talk to. He watched me. His eyes were not worried. They were predatory. He was scanning my face for a flinch, a sign of guilt. He knew. Scammers, I asked, forcing my voice to remain level. That sounds dangerous. I will keep my eyes open. As soon as he turned away, the realization hit me like a physical blow. The only person who knew I was asking questions was Gary. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I dialed Gary's number. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. My stomach dropped. I frantically searched the name of his law practice on my phone. The search results showed the office address I had visited earlier, but the status was listed clearly, permanently closed. Lease ended 2 months ago. He wasn't a struggling lawyer helping the poor. I scrolled further back, digging through cached pages until I found an old press release from 3 years ago. Triaxis Freight Systems retains Gary Milton as labor consultant. I had walked right into the lion's den and handed them the map to my escape. That night, I waited until the rhythm of Victor's breathing deepened into sleep. I slid out of bed and picked up his phone from the nightstand. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would wake him. I tried the passcode. It was Jamie's birthday. The screen unlocked. I did not look for texts this time. I went straight to his banking app. I scrolled past the grocery charges and gas station visits until I found them. Monthly transfers. $500. $700. All going to an account holder named Lucas V. Hale. The memo lines read, tuition and support. I went to the bathroom again, locking the door and turning on the fan to mask any sound. I typed the name into a search bar. Lucas Vore, Hale. A profile popped up for a 21-year-old student at a state college in Indiana. There was a photo of him in a basketball uniform. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop the scream building in my throat. He had Victor's jawline. He had Victor's eyes. Victor did not just have a gambling debt. He had a secret family. He had a full-grown son that he had hidden from me for 10 years. I stared at the smiling face of the young man on the screen. The plan became terrifyingly clear. Victor was not just killing me to pay off debts. He was clearing the board. He was going to cash out my life insurance, claim the house, and funnel everything to Lucas. And Jamie. My sweet, 8-year-old Jamie was just a prop in his tragedy, an orphan to garner sympathy until he became too much of a burden. I looked at my face in the mirror. I looked old, tired, and terrified. But behind the fear, something else was waking up. They thought I was just a senile woman asking the wrong questions. They had no idea that I was done asking. I picked Jamie up from school and drove straight past our turn, heading instead to a run-down donut shop on the edge of town. It was empty at 3 in the afternoon, smelling of sugar glaze and old coffee. We sat in a corner booth, away from the windows. I watched my 8-year-old son pick at a chocolate-frosted donut, his small fingers trembling just enough to notice. I waited until he had taken a few bites, letting the sugar calm his nerves, before I reached across the sticky table and covered his hand with mine. "Jamie?" I said softly, keeping my voice steady. "You were so brave the other night. Can you tell me exactly where you were when you called me?" He looked down at his lap, his voice barely a whisper. "I was in the bottom cabinet, the one under the sink where you keep the big pots. I was playing on my game, but the battery died. Then I heard Dad come in with that man." I squeezed his hand. "And what did you hear? Baby?" "They were talking about the gas pipes," Jamie said, his eyes finally meeting mine, wide and wet with fear. "Dad said. He said he would turn the stove on, but not light it. He said the smell would go everywhere. And then he said you would sleep really deep because of the medicine he put in your cocoa." My blood froze. The cocoa. The mug Victor had handed me with that solicitous smile the morning I came home. If I had drunk it that night, I would never have woken up. I was scared. "Mom?" Jamie continued, tears spilling over his lashes. "I wanted to tell you, but I thought Dad would be mad. He has been acting weird, asking me weird questions." What kind of questions, I asked, fighting the urge to pull him into my arms and never let go. He asks things like, "If it was just the two of us, where would you want to live?" Or he says, "Mum is getting old, isn't she? She forgets things a lot." He never yells, but it makes my tummy hurt. It was psychological poison. Victor was not just planning to kill me. He was rewriting my history in my son's mind, planting the seeds of a senile, incompetent mother so that my death would seem like a tragic inevitability. "Listen to me. Jamie," I said, lifting his chin so he had to look at me. "Dad is wrong. I am not forgetting anything, and nobody is going to hurt us. I believe everything you told me. You are the reason I am safe. We are going to play a game now, okay? We have to pretend everything is normal until I can fix this." He nodded, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Okay, Mom." When we got home, the performance began. Victor was in the living room. Jamie walked right up to him and hugged his waist. "Hey, Dad," Jamie said. "Hey, buddy?" Victor replied, ruffling his hair. It looked like a perfect domestic scene, but over Victor's shoulder. Jamie's eyes locked onto mine, seeking reassurance. I gave him a tiny nod. 30 minutes later, the pipes in the upstairs bathroom groaned, signaling that Victor was in the shower. Jamie tugged on my sleeve and pulled me into the kitchen. He knelt on the linoleum and opened the cabinet under the sink. He pointed to the back corner, near the floorboards. "There," he whispered. I was picking at it when I was hiding. It was a loose screw on the kickplate. I used a butter knife to twist it out. Behind the thin wood veneer, taped to the dark underside of the cabinet, was a small silver key. I had lived in this house for 5 years and never knew it existed. "He goes to the garage with this," Jamie whispered. I took the key and ran to the garage. The air smelled of oil and sawdust. I scanned the walls, looking for anything out of place. Behind a pegboard where Victor hung his wrenches, I found a loose panel. I pried it open with my fingernails. Inside sat a small, fireproof document box. My hands shook as I inserted the key. It turned with a smooth click. Inside, I found the smoking gun. There was a photocopy of the original insurance policy, the one with my real, jagged signature, not the smooth forgery on the amendment at the office. And beneath that, a last will and testament I had never seen. It stated that in the event of my death, Victor Hale was to be granted sole custody of Jamie and full control of all assets, cutting out Melissa entirely. He had kept the originals. His arrogance was his flaw. He needed the real documents to prove he owned everything once I was gone. But by keeping them, he had given me the weapon I needed to bury him. I stared at the papers, no longer feeling fear, only a cold, calculating rage. Victor Hale thought he was trapping a helpless old woman. He had no idea he had just handed the keys to his destruction to the accountant, who knew exactly how to balance the books. I did not call Melissa to beg for a listening ear this time. I was done being the emotional mother she could dismiss. Instead, I sent her an email with 3 attachments: the audio file of Victor plotting my murder, the photo of the forged insurance amendment, and the picture of the fake will I had found in the garage safe. I followed it with a single text message. "Read these. If you want the truth, meet me tomorrow at the coffee shop near the courthouse. Come alone." Melissa arrived 20 minutes late, her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and defensive anger. She slammed her purse onto the table. "You are unbelievable. Mum," she hissed, keeping her voice low. "You are actually manufacturing evidence now. You are trying to frame him because you are insecure." I did not argue. I simply slid the physical copies of the documents across the table, pointing to the signature on the insurance paper. "Look at the tail of the S is. Melissa, just look at it." She glared at me, then looked down. As she read the terms of the will, the ones that cut her out completely in favor of Victor, her expression shifted from anger to confusion, and finally to a pale, sick realization. She pulled out her phone and played the audio file again, holding the speaker to her ear. When she heard Victor's voice mention Harborstone and gas leak, she covered her mouth. "He told me," Melissa stammered, her eyes filling with tears. "He told me that if anything ever happened to you, the insurance money would help me pay off my student loans. He made it sound like he was just looking out for me. He asked me when you were usually home alone. He said he wanted to surprise you with gifts." I told him everything. "I don't need an apology, Melissa," I said, my voice steady and cold. I need an accomplice. I need you to go back to him and play the role of the daughter who thinks he is a saint. Can you do that? She nodded, wiping her face. I will kill him. No, I corrected her. We are going to let the law do that. But first, we have to make sure he cannot wiggle out. We set up a shared note on our phones, disguised as a folder for holiday recipes. If I typed, "We need more flour," it meant Victor was asking about my schedule. "The oven is acting up" meant he was agitated about money. It was a silent, encrypted line of communication that he would never think to check. The next day, I took a half-day off work and visited the city's Department of Building and Housing. I met with a safety inspector named Ms. O'Reilly. I did not tell her my husband was trying to kill me. I played the part of the anxious homeowner. "I am terrified of gas leaks," I told her, wringing my hands. "If I smell something, what is the exact protocol? How do I ensure the fire department comes immediately and treats it as a priority?" She gave me a detailed rundown, her professional curiosity piqued by my intensity. "If you smell rotten eggs, Mrs. Brooks, do not touch a light switch. Call 911 from outside. We take gas leaks very seriously." I had planted the seed. If a call came from my address, the response would be swift. I spent the rest of the week moving chess pieces. I opened a private bank account and diverted 20% of my paycheck into it. I rented a post office box 3 towns over and mailed a USB drive containing the recording and copies of the documents to it. If the house burned down with the evidence inside, the backup would survive. My final stop was the local branch of Harborstone Life. I sat across from a young agent and put on my reading glasses. "I want to update my beneficiary information," I said clearly. "I want to add my children, Melissa Carter and Jamie Hale, as equal beneficiaries alongside my husband, and I want this conversation recorded for quality assurance, as per your company policy." The agent nodded and typed into his computer. "Of course, Mrs. Brooks. It will take 48 hours to update in the system." "That is fine," I said. "Just make sure the request is time-stamped today." I had just created a paper trail that contradicted Victor's entire narrative. If I died, he could not claim I wanted him to have everything. He would have to explain why I was actively trying to give money to my children days before my accident. 2 nights later, the trap snapped shut. Victor walked into the kitchen, rubbing his hands together. "Winter is coming. Elle," he said, offering me that same tired, fake smile. "It is going to be a cold one. I think we should finally get those gas lines fixed. I called Doyle's guys. They can come this Friday night." I looked down at the ledger I was balancing, hiding the spark of adrenaline in my eyes. Friday. He had set the date. "That sounds good, Victor," I said, turning a page. "Whatever you think is best." He walked away, whistling a tune. He thought he was closing the deal. He did not know he had just announced the time of his own funeral. The night of the planned accident arrived on a chilly Friday. Victor announced a special family dinner, inviting Melissa to join us for his famous lasagna. He was insistent. "You take the night off." "Elle," he insisted, kissing my cheek with a gesture that felt sickeningly possessive. "No work. Just relax. And I told Jamie he can have a movie night with Jane across the street, just so the grown-ups can have some romantic space." I feigned hesitation. "Oh, I don't know. Victor, I have so much to do." "Nonsense," he snapped, though the smile remained fixed. "You need this." I texted Melissa immediately tonight. Don't come alone. She understood. Melissa was driving up from Columbus, bringing her friend, Kelly, a lieutenant with the Columbus Fire Department, who was now on the payroll of my silent counterplot. Kelly did not know the whole story, only that Melissa had a severe, credible fear of her stepfather and needed a professional witness on standby if the smoke alarm went off. Kelly stayed a block away, ready to alert the assigned tactical response unit if she got the signal. Victor was in his element. He poured the wine with a flourish, filling my glass too high. I watched him closely as he leaned over the counter, pretending to scoop ice for his own glass. I saw the flash of the tiny white pill as he dropped it into my glass, then stirred it with a teaspoon. The sedative was meant to make my death look like a deep, natural sleep before the gas leak took hold. Cheers. Honey, he said, raising his glass. To us, I replied, touching his glass. As he turned his back to put the bottle away, I swiftly switched the glasses. The drug-laced wine was now Victor's. In the kitchen, I saw Doyle, Victor's grim accomplice, lurking by the stove. Victor gave him a subtle nod. Doyle was supposedly checking the new gas system. He pretended to twist a valve shut, but I knew he was doing the opposite, opening the main line just enough to fill the house with the odorless, invisible killer. He planned to trigger the ignition switch on the oven once I was confirmed unconscious on the sofa. Jamie, my brave little soldier, was already across the street with Jane. He carried his backpack, not with homework, but with the photocopied documents and the USB I had prepared. If the house blew up, the evidence would be safe. Melissa arrived exactly on time, entering with a forced cheerfulness that would have fooled anyone but me. Wow, Dad, she said, embracing Victor. Lasagna night. This is so cozy. She set her purse on the counter. But first, she activated the voice recorder on her phone and tucked it into a ceramic fruit bowl on the corner of the kitchen island. It was aimed right at Victor. Victor was starting to slur his words, the sedative quickly dissolving into the wine. He was talking too loudly, too confidently, oblivious to the recording device. We're ready, Doyle, Victor boasted, leaning heavily against the counter. Elle is out cold soon. We just got to get out and give it 10 minutes. Then call the fire. Nobody gets suspicious. The payout is clean, Doyle mumbled, his tone flat. Harborstone is paying out every cent. It's $1 million policy? Doyle. Victor slurred, his guard completely down. $1 million. And tomorrow, all my debt is gone, and I am free. We split the $75,000 as agreed. Every word was being recorded, the specific crime, the exact financial motive, the precise timeline. Victor stumbled toward the living room, Doyle following. They thought the old woman was asleep. I lay motionless on the sofa, breathing through my mouth, my eyes barely slits. I waited until Victor had staggered past me and reached the front door. I heard the lock click. They were leaving to start the 10-minute clock. I launched myself off the sofa. No, Victor heard the sudden movement and turned around, his eyes wide and struggling to focus. I ran to the nearest window and threw it open, letting the cold night air rush in and displace the rising gas. I grabbed my phone and stabbed the 911 button. 911. What is your emergency? I need the fire department immediately, I shouted, my voice high and frantic. Possible gas leak at 3317 Willow Road. My husband and another man are attempting to sabotage the lines to cause a fire. There are children in the neighborhood. Before I could hang up, The sound of sirens ripped through the quiet neighborhood. Red and blue lights flashed through the kitchen window. Victor and Doyle had only made it as far as the front lawn. Victor froze, looking back at the open window and the phone pressed to my ear. He saw the fire truck screaming around the corner. He saw Melissa standing in the doorway with her phone. Panic contorted his face, but then it cleared. His eyes, though heavily glazed from the drug, were perfectly lucid, fixed on mine. He knew I had played him. He was pinned against the garage by the first police officer who jumped out of the cruiser. "It's just maintenance. Just normal pipe work," Victor yelled. Trying to block the sight of the open gas valve Doyle had failed to close. Melissa ran out, pushing past the cop. "I have evidence," she said, handing her phone to the officer. "It is an audio recording of them confessing to the entire plan." I walked onto the front porch, the chaos of flashing lights and shouts swirling around me. I stood on the threshold of the home that was supposed to be my grave, and I looked down at Victor Hale, handcuffed and yelling into the rain. His eyes met mine one last time, filled not with confusion or love, but with pure, venomous hatred. In that moment, I shed the last vestiges of Eleanor the victim. I had traded my exhaustion for fury, and my fear for a meticulous, beautiful revenge. Weeks later, Victor and Doyle faced arraignment at the Cuyahoga County Courthouse. The charges were severe attempted first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and reckless endangerment. I sat beside Melissa, my presence a solid wall against Victor's desperate glares. Victor's court-appointed attorney, a slick man named Mr. Thompson, tried to spin a tragic narrative. He argued the audio was just dark humor between stressed business partners, and the gas leak was merely an unfortunate repair mishap. Thompson hammered on Victor's clean record, pleading to the jury that his client was a hard-working family man, a pillar of his small garage business. The prosecutor, however, was meticulous. He laid out the evidence like a ledger. I would have been proud of the Harborstone life policy naming Victor as the sole beneficiary. Victor's detailed history of gambling debts, the wire transfers to Lucas, and the testimony regarding the anonymous warning call I had received after visiting the fake lawyer. The court reached its first tense impasse when Mr. Thompson, Victor's lawyer, produced a shocking piece of evidence, an email, purportedly from me to Gary Milton, the fraudulent lawyer. The email was a carefully constructed lie, painting me as the conspirator, allegedly asking Milton for advice on how to stage a non-fatal accident to collect an insurance settlement for medical debt. The courtroom erupted. Thompson beamed at the jury, suggesting that I was the one who was unstable and trying to fleece the insurance company. The judge called for a brief recess to verify the email's authenticity. It was the moment Victor thought he had won. He grinned, a cold, triumphant flash of teeth directed straight at me. But Melissa had been working in the dark. During the recess, she approached the prosecutor with information she had quietly gathered from the State Justice Department. When the trial resumed, Melissa's lawyer introduced evidence that Gary Milton himself was under internal investigation. Milton was on the take, receiving kickbacks from Triaxis and Harborstone to neutralize risky claims and silence potentially litigious employees. The fabricated email was part of a larger, systemic effort to gaslight victims and secure commissions. The attempted frame job became yet another layer of Victor's conspiracy. Harborstone Life was forced to send a corporate representative to the stand, under intense pressure from the prosecutor, who threatened a class-action lawsuit. The company official admitted to a culture where sales agents conspired with third parties, Victor, Mason, and Gary, to profit from suspicious death payouts. provided the paperwork was technically compliant. Mason, my former boss at Triaxis, was arrested for complicity shortly after. The prosecution presented one of his internal emails, dated just days before Victor's attempt. It read, "If the Brooks case goes through clean, my bonus this year is secured." That sentence was the final blow, a venomous reminder that the people I had trusted with my time and my labor had been betting on my life. Facing insurmountable evidence, Doyle took a plea deal. He was led to the stand, a pale and broken man, and gave a chillingly detailed confession: the gas line setup, the crushed sleeping pill in the cocoa, the 10-minute timer for the ignition, and Victor's complete role as the mastermind. When it was my turn to speak before the jury, the air in the courtroom felt brittle and heavy. I did not ask for money. I did not ask for the maximum sentence. My final statement was direct and focused only on the one thing that mattered. "I only ask one thing of this court," I said, looking not at Victor, but at the jury and the judge. "I ask you to ensure that Jamie Hale, my son, is never again used by his father, or by any insurance company, as a pawn in any game of assets or betrayal." The sentence came swiftly. Victor was convicted on all counts, sentenced to multiple years in state prison, and stripped of all parental and contractual rights to Jamie and the insurance payouts. Harborstone and Triaxis faced massive lawsuits, opening the door for enormous damages, but I knew the money was coming. I was already working on a plan to use it not for retirement, but to cement my revenge, turning Victor's intended profits into an unassailable fortress for my children. In the weeks following Victor's conviction, Harborstone Life, desperate to contain the media fallout and avoid a massive public relations disaster, offered a substantial settlement outside of the civil trial. My lawyer confirmed it was enough for me to comfortably retire. Enough for me to never face the chill of the Triaxis loading dock again. I agreed to take the money, but I included a non-negotiable term in the written agreement. A significant portion of the funds had to be allocated to establish an internal training and oversight fund within Harborstone, specifically designed to prevent the replication of Brooks cases, forcing them to confront, in writing, their systemic negligence. Triaxis, equally eager to avoid deeper legal scrutiny and possible criminal negligence charges, offered me a generous severance package. I signed the separation document without looking back. "I am leaving." I wrote in the exit interview notes, so I never have to bow my head to a boss who values a worker's life as just another number on a spreadsheet. With the settlement money, I established a joint trust fund for Jamie and Melissa. The terms were ironclad, explicitly forbidding Victor, or any of his heirs, including Lucas, from ever touching a single dime. This was my final, meticulous act of financial revenge, cutting off the blood money supply Victor had schemed to control. "I decided to sell the house in Lakewood," Jamie pleaded, "but I like the tree in the backyard. Mom. I knew I could not raise my son in a house that was meant to be my tomb. Before signing the final papers, I drove Jamie with me out to the state prison in suburban Youngstown. In the cold, sterile visitation room, I faced Victor Hale one last time. He tried to reclaim his old charm, his voice dropping into the familiar, manipulative honey trap. "Elle, you know I love you," he murmured, the words hollow. It was the debt, the pressure to be a provider. I just went too far. "We can fix this." I placed a copy of the trust document on the small, scratched table between us. I explained calmly that everything now belonged to Jamie and Melissa, that he had nothing left but his sentence. Then I told him about Lucas. "I know about him. Victor," I said. "And every month, His tuition will be paid, but he will also receive a letter from me, not a curse, but a warning. A warning to him not to become the second version of you. Victor's face twisted in genuine anguish, a reaction far stronger than when he heard his own sentence. Why would you drag Lucas into this? Eleanor. He is innocent. He cried, his voice cracking. Because if nobody stops it, this loop of men killing women for money will never end. I replied, standing up. Victor, I am the last woman in that loop. Leaving the prison, Jamie and I stood by the grey river, frozen over with late-season snow. You saved me with a phone call. Bug, I told him, adjusting the scarf around his neck. The rest was my job. And now I'm done. The feeling was not triumphant joy, but the quiet, deep stillness of a debt paid in full. The story ends on the day I accepted the keys to a smaller, brighter apartment in downtown Cleveland. It was my first evening not on a night shift, without the sound of a strange man's footsteps, only Jamie's laugh echoing from the kitchen. My phone chimed with a text from Melissa. I'm on my way. Let's talk about using some of that money to help other women. Okay. Mum, from the wreckage of a murder plot, I had finally redefined my family and written my own justice. Thanks for listening to my story. I'd really appreciate it if you'd let me know where you're tuning in from so we can connect. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like and press the hype button to help get this story heard by more people.